Hello, this is Jeffrey Geisner, founder of the Obligations of Memory podcast, and I'm thrilled to introduce Dana Shrager, Dr. Dana Shrager, who is a great friend of mine, and we met through Dana's Facebook cooking groups. But before we really get into Facebook's cooking groups and Dana's backgrounds, I wanted to ask you, Dana, maybe you can tell me a little bit about your family, your parents, your grandparents, and how you got into cooking, Jewish cooking specifically.
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be here today. And I grew up in a kitchen that was really busy and full of people. A lot of my childhood memories are being in the kitchen with my mom or grandma. My mom would often have her sisters over, my aunts, or my sister would be in the kitchen. So there was a lot of camaraderie and life and happiness in the kitchen as everybody cooked together and collaborated on making a family holiday or family meal. Most of the holidays being Jewish holidays. And so sort of, I grew up in the kitchen. So that's really where it all started for me.
Who was the primary influence, your grandmother or your mother?
My grandma is the main baking influence, which I know you can appreciate. And my mom is probably the biggest influence because I was in the kitchen with her the most. And since my mom and her siblings all cook so well, I would, ask my mom, well, how did you learn to cook? Or, what kind of a cook is your mother? My grandma on that side of the family and my mom's mom was much older. My mom was the baby of the family. And so she wasn't cooking very much at that point. And so my mom said, well, look, she grew up in the shtetl in what is now the Ukraine. And she said, they didn't have cookbooks. They didn't have, things to measure with or whatever. It would be, a bissel of this and a handful of that. And if it was a cup of something, it was just whatever cup was around. It wasn't a specific, like 1 cup measure. And so they all learned to be intuitive cooks. And that was very baffling to me. How do you cook at that time? How do you cook without a recipe? I was new to cooking and I just didn't understand that. And
how old were you?
I don't know how old I was when I had that conversation, but since a very young age, I was in the kitchen cooking with my family, and with my grandma in specific. We would make holiday cookies and make these butter cookies in different shapes and decorate them with sprinkles. And, as a kid, that was always the fun part for me, is coming up with all different sprinkle combinations to decorate the cookies.
What did you call your grandma?
Grandma.
Not Bobby or Bob, nothing.
No, but my other grandma, the grandma I baked with was my father's mother, but my other grandma, we called her Ma. They were Ma and Pa, and they were very much from the old country. And if you ask them where they were from, they would say the old country, which basically meant their shtetl in Tsarist Russia.
And were they involved in the Holocaust, or they got out before?
My grandparents got out before. My mother's parents got out before. They were able to leave through my grandmother's brother. But my grandfather left all his family behind. He had 9 siblings. They were left behind. And half of them perished in the Holocaust. And as maybe will be familiar to you, nobody talked about this. And if I asked my mom, well, where are they? And she would say, they're lost. So they couldn't even say, that they died or, they were murdered. And actually my grandparents' siblings that survived because the USSR put them in a Siberian labor camp. So they were in a forced labor camp during the Holocaust. And I'm sure I can't even imagine what that was like, but that is how they lived. And then the other half died, and their names are listed in the memorial for Babin Yar, because they lived outside of Kiev.
I see. So those of us in LA know Dr. Dana Shrager as a clinical psychologist. And but those listening to podcasts do not know anything about you. So it's always been intriguing how you have gone from clinical psychology and focused on trauma and intergenerational trauma to the kitchen. And your true passion really is to teach people about Jewish cooking. And you have two Facebook groups, one called Jewish Holiday Cooking, and the other one is called Jewish Cooking. And I'd like to know a little bit about the history of those, and because they're similar
Okay.
but
Thank you, Jeffrey.
yeah.
First of all, I guess I got really interested in intergenerational trauma and inherited trauma because my grandpa, although he was able to get out of his shtetl before the Holocaust, maybe 2 decades before, there was always a sadness to him, and it was just really a big loss to him, and he had survivor guilt, and just he just felt so guilty that he was able to escape, but he wasn't able to bring his siblings with him. And it's not just the siblings. I'm doing a lot of genealogy study right now, and I'm trying to find the whole rest of the extended family. And I know my great grandparents were murdered. I know I've been able to research the details of that, and actually on both sides. And it's just sad. I think everybody who has family touched by the Holocaust or pogroms or any kind of genocide knows what a hole and what a loss that is. And so I feel like my grandparents carried the trauma of their experience in the pogroms and the loss of the relatives in the pogroms and the Holocaust, in their hearts. And they weren't very emotional people. They were traumatized. They had PTSD. They were stiff. They were unemotional. They were closed down. They were shut down. And it's a loss. Like, I feel like they couldn't let new love in their heart and have a strong relationship with me, their grandchild. And I had a lot of love from my other grandparents, but anyway, so this has all been very interesting to me. And as Jeffrey knows, I'm doing research in this area to understand intergenerational trauma more, help people identify the symptoms, and help people figure out ways to heal the trauma. So in the meantime, the cooking is very connected to my family. So they seem like different things, like, one is a career and one is a hobby, but, at this point they're intertwining more and more. And when I cook, it's like a love letter to my mom, my aunts, my grandparents. I cook their recipes. And I think Jeffrey knows this story as well, is that when I got the recipes from my family, it was like a gift, to have a recipe box, or to have cookbooks with markings in it. That's like a gift your relatives give you. But yet all those recipes written down on note cards, Jeffrey knows, they're like chicken scratchings. They don't have good measurements. They have very few directions, if at all. Everything is pretty much bake 350 at an hour, which sometimes is accurate and sometimes is not. And I've had to do quite a lot of research to piece together these recipes, as has Jeffrey. And so it's taken me decades of my life to piece together their recipes. And when I was doing this in my 20s, I said to myself, and I was busy in graduate school for psychology, I said to myself, one day I'm going to write a cookbook. I'm going to put my family's recipes in a cookbook. Not only to honor them or remember them, but they were all really good cooks, and they were very famous within the family and their social circle for cooking. And people would often ask for their recipes or say, "Oh, your mom used to make that. That was so good." People I know want their recipes, so I have been recreating their recipes just like Jeffrey. And my time was filled with in graduate school and building my career and having small children. But starting 10 years ago, I started a recipe website so that I could document these recipes. And instead of printing a cookbook on paper, I said, you know what, one by one, I'm going to put these recipes online. So anyway, that's
Tell
the
me,
start,
tell me a
Jeffrey.
little bit about your family, your children, how many children you have, your husband, and how they connect into the food as well.
I have two daughters. They're teenagers. I have a husband, and we enjoy family dinners together. And I like to keep it interesting and make new things. And when my youngest daughter was in nursery school, the nursery school started a CSA vegetable box delivery. So the vegetables were from a local farm. They had been picked the day before. They got delivered to the front of the school, and I subscribe to the farm share, and I bring home a huge box of vegetables, tons of vegetables that I'd never made before, and a volume I had never made before. And I didn't want the vegetables to go to waste, so I got very busy learning how to cook lots of new recipes. Thankfully, my family is pretty adventurous and enjoyed the adventure. I put new things on the table. I just put it there. The kids would either eat it or not. You know, as a psychologist, I knew not to be like pushy with the food. I think maybe a lot of us remember my grandma who grew up during the Depression, felt that you had to, like, you couldn't waste food. You had to eat every drop on your plate. It was very important to my grandma to say, you know, clean plate club, like you have to eat everything on your plate.
How do you get your teenage daughters to sit with you at dinner every night? That's unbelievable to hear that. You know, my son, who was a teenager 20 years ago, maybe, I never could, he was always busy playing tennis or going with his friends. He was never home for dinners.
It's something that my family is just used to. We've done it ever since they're super tiny. It's something that they expect. I mean, I don't know. I just even remember this one time, my oldest was maybe a year and a half, and she got this new toy. It was a dollhouse, and it was a talking dollhouse. It was really cool to her. She didn't want to get off the floor from playing with it. And I didn't know what to do. So I picked up the toy and I put it on the table, and then she sat in her high chair. And, you know, I mean, it wasn't something I did every day. It was just something I did once, but one way or another, everybody sits at the table. And my older daughter is in college, but my younger daughter is in high school, and she does have activities, but they're not actually, we fit dinner around. If she has a little bit of a late activity, we dinner a little later. If she has sort of a later activity, we eat dinner a little earlier. So she tells me her schedule, and there's always family dinner, and they just expect it. They just don't know any differently, and they enjoy it. And that's when the whole family talks about their day. And so she likes to come to the table and tell us about her day. And that's the great thing about food, is it brings people together. That's what makes food so special.
So do you celebrate Shabbat with a special meal, or how do you deal with Shabbat?
Sometimes we do, but usually in my particular family, I've cooked all week long. I've cooked Sunday through Thursday. And so Friday, a lot of the times we go out to dinner. So it's different than the traditional way to celebrate Shabbat, but that it becomes my day. It becomes my day off. And my kids, who love to dine out and love to try new cuisines, and have their favorite restaurants, and they're like sushi, you know, like they want to go. And so usually that's family night out.
Interesting.
Saturday night is date night out.
Nice. So I think we met, if I can remember, and I was doing my research on building up the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance group, as I reached out to you as an admin of one of these cooking groups. And at that time, I was also working on recipe research and recreating my mom's bakes of memory, because I didn't have any recipes. Again, like chicken scratch is a perfect example. So you were kind enough to really kind of give me the lay of the land of what managing a group was. And it's quite astounding. You have over 20,000 members in your two groups. And I still haven't figured out how you manage 20,000 people. So how do you do that?
Okay, well, it started during the pandemic, spending more time at home. And I started thinking that the Jewish holidays are coming, and it's going to be really different this year to have sort of, quote, no guests, or, you know, have such a small table full of people. And my kids were, pretty sad and depressed to have all their activities shut down. And so I said, I still really want to make it special, and I still, for them and for myself, but I wanted it to be still feel festive. So I said, I think other people are probably in the same boat, and I really like to share recipes. And I had been participating in other people's Jewish cooking groups and getting a good response to the recipes I was posting. I said, you know what? I'm going to start my own group. And it just was really
And
an
when was this?
epiphany.
When was that?
This was August or September of 2020. It was just before Rosh Hashanah 2020. And so I said, that's it. I'm starting a group. And I did. I invited people who are my Facebook friends that I thought would be interested. And I just acted like it was already a big group, even if it was small. And I talked to every person in the group, whether I knew them or not, like they were my friend. So I was like really real and open, and giving my ideas and suggestions, and open to other people's ideas and suggestions, and just had this attitude like, we're in this boat together, let's figure this out. And people really responded to that, really liked it. A lot of people were home, so they were finding my group or participating in my group. And I had a lot of people, early members in the group.
What is the name of that?
That group is Jewish Holiday Cooking. So I have a lot of people in that who started in that group who were enjoying it, and they started inviting their friends. So I'd say an acquaintance of mine, somebody that I had known at the elementary school, but not that well. Her kids are quite a bit older, but she's a great woman, and she's a great cook. And she says, I'm inviting my friends. She invited 150 people to my group. She said, I'm only giving you bolabustas, only good cooks, only people who will participate, only people who will be into this. So it grew very organically. People told people, and Facebook saw that it had a lot of engagement, and Facebook started recommending it to people as well. So it's now grown in a year and a half to, we're getting close to 5,000 people. And in the meanwhile, as I'm running this group, my mentor, cookbook author Joan Nathan, noticed the things I was posting, and she really liked what I was posting. And when she decided that she was going to step down from running her group, she said, I like what you're doing in your group. Would you be interested in running my group? So now I run Jewish cooking on Facebook as well. So that's my second group. And when Joan gave me the group, it had 13,000 people in it. And now we're very close to 19,000 people, and it's been a year.
So you also have a third group, I think. Is that correct?
I am one of the officers in Food Bloggers Los Angeles. So
What about Dana's Table? I noticed the group.
Okay. Dana's Table is the name of my website, and I have a page called Dana's Table that corresponds to what I post on Dana's Table website. So I started my food blog 10 years ago called Foodie Goes Healthy. And that was to incorporate all the new vegetable recipes from my vegetable share. But then in the pandemic, I started getting even more into my Jewish cooking in the Facebook group. And so I decided that these recipes needed a home. It could be healthy-ish family dinners for everyday cooking, and then holiday cooking for Jewish holidays. And they have one home, and it's called Dana's Table. That's my new website that I started this year.
So it's DanasTables.com.
Yes, DanasTable.com.
Having gone to see it, I would recommend everyone to click on that URL and or type in the URL, because I think you'll find it just a menagerie of recipes. So tell me about how you went about going from chicken scratch to recipe, because I think that is a fascinating story.
Thank you, Jeffrey. This is something Jeffrey's done himself. And Jeffrey and I discovered that we have a similar way of doing this. So it's so interesting that Jeffrey and I had, a lot of parallels in our life. And then we met and realized we had these parallels. So that's how I think we became fast friends. So okay, originally, when I was in my 20s and I was trying to recreate a family recipe, even most of them were my family recipes, but even one of my best friends, when her baby was born, I came to visit her, and she shared with me her secret stash of her grandma's rugula. And because she was so thankful I came to like help her with her newborn. So she's like, go in my freezer. I have rugula my grandma made. And the rugula was so good. I said to her, I have to have your grandma's recipe. So she called her grandma on the phone. We get chicken scratchings of a recipe. It's really barely there. And I'm like, I can't make this. I don't know what to do. So what did I do? I turned to the two Jewish cookbooks that I had gotten as wedding presents. And one was by Joan Nathan, Jewish Cooking in America. And the other was by Faye Levy, Jewish International Cooking, I believe that cookbook is called. Faye has over 20 cookbooks now, and I have a few of them, and Joan has over 12, and I have quite a few of those as well. But I had to use those as my references. So I had to take my chicken scratchings and compare to other recipes to figure out, what this recipe might be saying. And then
talk about how you use Excel, because I think that's really
okay. Now
in
the modern era, I do utilize the cookbooks, but I also search online. And Jeffrey makes an Excel spreadsheet. What Jeffrey doesn't know, because we talked about this via email, is I make a handwritten chart. And I've done this, I guess I must have done this since way back long ago, but let's say it's kugel. Let's say it's noodle kugel. So I, down one column, put all the possible ingredients. And then I also put different like variables of the procedure, like temperature and time and pan size, tips. And then across the top, I put every single author or website that I want to check out or compare. So they say they use this many noodles, they use this much cottage cheese, this one uses cream cheese, this one doesn't, this many eggs. And, I start comparing and I go, like Jeffrey, I know Jeffrey does the same. I go, there's an outlier here, 2 eggs. Nobody uses that few. And then, this person uses 8 eggs. I don't want to use that many. Most people don't use that many, not that many. So, then I say, well, it looks like most people use 4, some people use a little more, a little less. And then I start trying to figure out, and then I think, well, what do I want it to be? So when I developed my kugel recipe, which developed over time and is an amalgamation of a lot of people's recipes, I really like apple in my kugel. Some people put pineapple, some people put raisins. I really like cream cheese in kugel. My aunt taught me that, one of my aunts. And then as soon as I made her recipe with cream cheese in it, I like that like lusciousness that brings to the kugel. So anyway, it's a lot of research to compare recipes and start thinking of your own sensibility. Like if you're baking, if somebody doesn't put salt, just like at least a pinch or a little bit of salt in the baking, more times than not, I'll add salt. I go, no, you need the salt to highlight all the flavors, counterbalance the sweet. If they don't put vanilla in the recipe, oftentimes I will add vanilla. So it's adding your own likes from your own experience, as well as comparing
the same recipe twice.
Yes, I could definitely make I try to figure out, based on this method, what are the likely ingredients and proportions, but it doesn't always come out right the first time.
No,
I have to say
once you find it working, do you repeat it and you keep it?
If I love it, yes. If I love it, I definitely make it again. It could be.
Can I tell you that I never repeat the same recipe, even if I love it?
Yes, but then you go, well, this time I'll add in Heath bar or something. So isn't it sort of the same, but with a twist?
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
For Passover, I did something unusual, kosher for Passover noodles, but with dark chocolate and Nutella and marshmallows. So it was like this rocky road rocky road. It didn't really work with my diabetes, but it was so good.
But did you have like cottage cheese or cream cheese in it? Was it a
Oh,
poodle like that?
all that stuff, and then I added in the chocolate, the Nutella, and the Jif out of
It
the
must have been
can.
good, right? It must have
Oh,
been really
how
good.
could it
It
be
must have
bad?
been simple.
How could it be bad?
But that's genius, Jeffrey, and someone's going to want to copy that. But
So
yeah, I
let me
know you
ask you.
don't.
So let me ask
I
you.
know you don't like repeats. I do. I don't repeat everything, but if I love something, I definitely repeat it. But I also, which I guess is maybe surprising to me, tweak over time. Sometimes I think I thought it was perfect, and then I don't know. Down the road, sometimes later on, I just make small tweaks, either just on a whim or I adjust later. It's not that the first time wasn't great. It's just recipes evolve, which I discovered in analyzing some of Joan Nathan's cookbooks. When she did, I guess we're going to get into the story, but when she did a cooking class at my house, I really wanted to learn how to make gefilte fish. And I'd never made homemade gefilte fish before. So I said, let's do that. And then she said, I have a recipe in Jewish cooking from America. She goes, but now at the time, it was before her King Solomon's Table cookbook came out. She said, I have a new version of the recipe in King Solomon's Table, which she gave me the copy of before it was published. And she said, now I make my gefilte fish with half salmon. So it's just something that like evolved. The first recipe was perfectly good, but then she got this idea, or, now I like making it with half whitefish, half salmon. So I guess it's normal for recipes to evolve. And she has that a lot from cookbook to cookbook. She'll have different versions of an original recipe in subsequent cookbooks.
So I don't know if I ever told you the story. Myra, growing up, her grandmother, when she would go to the bathroom, there was a live carp in the bathtub. Which scared the hell out of her the first time she went as a small child into her grandmother's house, because she would literally kill the carp from the bathroom. It was like I don't know, Myra calls it like a 3-foot carp, probably wasn't that large, but yeah, that was always a funny story. So let me ask you a more technical question. When you're creating these recipes from multiple sources, how do you attribute the credits to them, or that they become your recipe?
If I'm putting it on my website, if I feel like I largely adapted from one person, then I put adapted by. Okay, but with recipes, the ingredients cannot be copywritten. But to be an ethical food blogger, you're supposed to change it substantially enough that it isn't still just that person's recipe. And directions can be copywritten. If it just says add X and stir or something like that, you can't copyright those words. But if you write in detail and language that's more extensive, that can be copywritten. And if you're a food blogger, a food writer, you're supposed to totally rewrite the directions in your own words. And I don't know, I'm the kind of person where I see a recipe and I always have my own ideas and my own angles. So I'm always tweaking recipes. I rarely make a recipe the way it's written. I'm always combining and tweaking. So it's really not an issue for me. My ingredients are usually substantially different, and I have my own view of the directions. So
how many?
But I could put, if someone substantially influenced this recipe, like I really relied heavily on one recipe, then you say adopted by so and so. And if I feel like other people, if multiple people had strong influences, I can say this recipe was influenced by these people. But if somehow I combine what 10 people did and it's nothing like anybody's, then it's I see it as my recipe.
So you really kind of jumped you went from no book to digital, sort of, I call it jumping the shark.
Yeah.
And you really are ahead of yourself by putting all those recipes onto a website, first blog. So how many recipes are now part of the DanasTablecom?
I have about 100 recipes on DanasTable.com, and I have 300 recipes in a queue. They're either 100% ready or like 90% ready. And there was a time period where I wasn't adding new recipes onto my blog, but I was still accumulating recipes. So I'm trying to decide what to do with all these recipes. I am definitely putting a lot of them on the blog, but I'm contemplating whether or not
on the website.
on the website, but
Yeah.
I'm contemplating whether or not I want to put uh, package them into a cookbook.
And how robust is your website search? So people can literally type in a keyword or something and get to your recipes.
It really varies. I have some recipes on, depending on the keywords, on page 1, and then I have some recipes in obscurity. But I'm also, food blogging was very different 10 years ago, so I'm in the middle of updating every recipe on there, which is a big undertaking to update 100 recipes, but I'm refreshing a lot of the photos, and I am fine-tuning my directions. If some of the earlier recipes, I think the directions need a little more clarifying. And then also in the early days of blogging, primarily all we did was tell stories and personal stories, and most of them are now just considered irrelevant. And so and now it's more popular or expected that you introduce a recipe with things like tips for making the recipe, variations of this recipe, and all these other.
You're saying my style is obsoleting. It's obsoleting as we speak. Is that what you're saying to me?
Actually, I guess that's what I'm saying, although I really have a huge soft spot for your recipes, and I guess which is maybe what attracted me to you, because I love the way you tell the stories about your mom and what the recipes mean to you. And when you write, I picture you being like a, I don't know, 7-year-old boy in your mom's kitchen, like looking up to her with like admiration. I like feel your relationship to her, and it's really beautiful. So that's what attracted me to your post.
How many cooking recipes versus baking recipes? You know, I'm by far more of baking than cooking, though I used to cook a lot, but I don't really cook anymore. So tell me.
Far more cooking than baking. I do enjoy baking, but like for getting dinner on the table is a day-to-day thing in my house. So that's really more of my priority and more of my recipe development. And living here in Los Angeles, we have a very diverse population here, and there's every single cuisine imaginable here. So I like going to Mexican, Thai, Chinese, Italian, anything, Greek. It goes on and on, the options here. And sometimes I'll be inspired by a restaurant and try to recreate their recipe. Or sometimes I just think it's just fun to have different cuisines. My mom cooked Italian and Chinese food herself. I have my cousin married an Italian man, and we have a bunch of his recipes, which I enjoy making as well.
So what's next on your bucket list?
Next on my bucket list, I'm very excited about this. This is going to happen next year. I'm organizing a trip to Italy. I'm inviting everybody who is a part of my cooking group on Facebook or is a Dana's Table newsletter subscriber to come on a trip to Italy with me. The theme of the trip is Southern Italian Jewish cooking. So I'm going on a research trip in early February. Actually, I don't have the date yet, but early next year, I'm going to go on a research trip to Italy and get immersed in the budding Jewish communities that are in Southern Italy. There were Jewish population dotting all over Southern Italy 500 years ago. People started to come around, call it 2 AD, and with the fall of the Roman temple, or maybe some people came as Roman slaves, some Jews came as Roman slaves, started coming over to Italy, and more came at different points. particularly a lot of people when the Jews were thrown out of Spain in 1492. They came to southern Italy, but shortly after that, they got thrown out again because the southern Italy was a Jewish territory. Sorry, it was a Spanish territory. Anyway, I'm fascinated by the history of the Jews around the world, how we've spread out all over, including Italy, and they've left their mark. There's ruins there. There's ruins of temples. There's ruins of mikvahs. There's street names. There's Jewish quarters. And so I want to take people to see these things and to learn the cooking. And my friend owns a cooking school in southern Italy, and we're going to go there and learn Southern Jewish Italian recipes.
All right. Well, I'm so happy that you are with me today. We're coming to the end of our Obligations in Memory podcast. Any last things you want to say to our audience?
Thank you, Jeffrey. I really appreciate you having me here today. And if people have enjoyed about talking about recipes and Jewish cooking and how Jewish cooking connects us to our past, I also see cooking as a way to connect us to our future, to create a family environment, to create a circle of friends. And in the Facebook group, we make friends with each other people who share the same passion. We give each other ideas. It's a really friendly, welcoming place. Yes, I'm there to share my expertise, but what I love about the groups is people who are in the groups have a lot of expertise and they share their recipe and ideas. So if this is exciting to people, please come check out Jewish Holiday Cooking and Jewish Cooking on Facebook. And I would love to have more people be a part of this friendly community of food lovers.
Well, thanks, Dana.